Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Antony Charles Allen. Some of you probably know me already, others may not. It's 10:55. We're here in Strömstad. I'm sure we all had a fantastic time last night. And some probably may have drank a little bit more than others. I know myself, I could have done with a few hours extra sleep. But anyway, before we begin, we're just going to make sure that our phones are in silent, or they're on airplane mode, or even better, they're switched off, hidden under the table, and all thrown in the bin. So, let's get going. Today, we're going to talk about Nutriculate. This is some software that I've developed over the years. We're going to dive into the discovery phase of this, a little bit about mathematics. Of course, it's CPU, so we're going to talk about architecture, and something about innovation. So, without any further ado, when I embarked on this project in 2013, I set out with one very simple aim, which was to learn how I could live to be 150. I'm not 150 quite yet, so just in case you're wondering, but it is one of my aims. Although I have to say that nights like last night probably don't contribute too much to that goal. Anyway, so living to 150, we all know that there are lots of different factors that affect our longevity. Things such as lifestyle, that's like sleep, exercise, not being too stressed, not working too hard. No, I'm just kidding, we should all work hard. Obviously abstaining from smoking and drinking less alcohol, which is again an irony. Anyway, there's genetic factors. There's also nutrition. And back then in 2013, it was nutrition which really captured me. We all know something about nutrition, what we get taught by our parents to eat, or by society, or by social media. But when I was going looking for answers back then, all I found was gluten-free diets, or the juice diet, or being a carnivore, or a vegan. There's so much information out there, most of it is conflicting. So I wanted to set myself 3 simple questions. Those are, what should I eat? How much of each food? That's critical. And how many calories in total? So with these 3 questions in mind, I set out on the discovery phase of this project. So I started looking around online to try to find a tool that would help me to create a perfectly balanced diet for myself, which was personalized to my needs. I found lots of different web apps which could help me with some aspects of nutrition, but I found really nothing that could calculate exactly what I should eat in order to get my nutritional requirements. The reasons for this became obvious to me a little later. So I began researching into the scientific literature about nutrition, all peer-reviewed, and I started reading masses of articles. It turns out that there was really a lot of information out there, but this is rarely discussed in the mass media. We all know exercise has a fabulous effect on the body, something which I should probably do more of myself. Anyway, but I discovered that it was nutrition which is really the key to longevity. There's a plethora of evidence out there covering everything from nutritional deficiencies to overdoses and, of course, the requirements of the human body. So that's what I wanted to establish first. Which nutrients does my body actually need? Of course, most people think about nutrition as being about fat, carbs, protein, and calories, because these are things we hear about all the time when you go to the gym and your personal trainer says, yeah, you need a high-protein diet, that's going to buff you up. But what there's not talked about is about all the other nutrition. This is a huge puzzle. Something like this. You've got different macronutrients of fats, protein, carbohydrates. You've got different elements, a subgroup of metals. Of course, vitamins. You've got choline, which is often ignored. Vitamins A, C, E, and K. Maybe I'm obscuring the screen, hope not. And also different B vitamins. You could also include in this list things like vitamin D, vitamin B7, that's biotin, fluoride, iodine, and many others, even such as alcohol, caffeine, and different amino acids. So, for me at this time, I just decided to focus on these 28 nutrients because these are by far the most well-researched ones where we have the most data. So I set about collecting numeric data because, of course, as programmers, we often work with numbers in order to solve problems. So I collected this numeric nutrient data. That was the first goal. But then I wanted to know how nutrition could influence disease, and that's when I came across a staggering statistic. Up to 80% of all diseases are in some way related to nutrition. Now that sounds crazy, to be frank, but when you start diving a bit deeper into it, you realize that that's absolutely true. Let's give an example. I'd love to take questions, but Kenneth, if you could, if anyone wants to ask questions, then there will be 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions. So just please write them down and I'll be happy to answer them later. So type 1 and type 2 diabetes. We probably all know what these are. Type 1 diabetes is where the body has an inability to produce insulin effectively. And type 2 diabetes is basically having too much sugar in the blood and not being able to produce quite enough insulin to handle that. I'm going to focus on type 2 diabetes here because that is the one that's most influenced by nutrition. In the medical world, we talk about comorbidities. And comorbidities are basically related conditions. And for type 2 diabetes, these could be things such as hypertension, obesity, eating disorders, depression, sleep problems, cancer, kidney disease, cardiovascular problems, and many of these conditions are also related to each other. Now, what's often talked about in the media is how nutrition can have a negative impact on the body. We all know if you eat too much fat, too much sugar, too many calories, you're going to put on weight, you're going to become obese, and that's going to have a number of problems associated with it. But what's not often talked about is how nutrition can have a hugely positive effect on the body. For example, cancer. Vitamin E and vitamin C are two very powerful antioxidants that work together to break down free radicals in the blood, that's the C, and then bind to these free radicals, that's vitamin E, to remove them from the body. So if you're able to keep up your level of these nutrients, you can dramatically reduce the risk of you getting cancer. Okay, so this is why now we know how nutrition affects certain conditions, and of course this is out there for many other conditions too. So I found out why nutrition was important. And I found out what nutrients my body needed, but I still had two remaining questions. What nutrients are in the foods that I eat, and how many calories should I consume? For the first question, what I needed was nutritional composition data. So, like any developer, I went around hunting on Google. That's what we do day to day. And I quickly came across the US Department of Agriculture's Food Composition Database. Now, this is a free online database. There are literally millions of rows there, millions of data points. And as a developer, it's awesome because there's an API which allows you to access the data easily. I also found the Norwegian Matvaretabellen, which has a lot of good information about Norway-specific products. Next, I needed to know how many calories I should eat per day. We're just going to blast through this quickly now. I'm going to refer to the Harris-Benedict equation. This was an equation that was originally derived in 1918 and then refined later at the end of the 20th century. And all this does basically is helps you to determine your basal metabolic rate from your age, height, weight. So it goes something like this. 10 times your weight in kilos, plus 6.25 times your height in centimeters, minus 5 times your age, plus a modifier. And this modifier is plus 5 for men and negative 161 for women. So I plugged in my rather personal information, and I got something like this, 1,787 calories. But that in itself is not enough to determine how many calories you should eat per day. So you need to multiply this by a physical activity level, or PAL. Now, I'm not going to go through all the different PALs that are out there, but essentially, I chose for myself something along 1.4, which basically means seated work with light exercise. Yeah, I'm a programmer, you can probably tell. So I multiplied my BMR by this PAL, And I got something around 2,500 calories per day, which, to be honest, is bang on the average requirements for a typical guy. Okay, so let's review what I'd found out then. My knowns. Well, I knew my nutritional requirements, and I knew the nutritional composition of the foods that I was going to eat. And I also now knew my calorie requirements. But I still had one major unknown, which was how much of each food should I actually eat? The number of grams. Just want to review this discovery phase quickly. It's important to get a fundamental understanding of the subject. If you don't have a full understanding, no solution that you deliver will ever be suitable. In application development, it is especially important to find out if there are technologies on the market that solve what it is that you're trying to do. You should always establish your knowns and your unknowns. This will really help you to get a handle on the problem and solve it in a better way. Okay, guys, this is where the fun really starts. So, it turns out that in nutrition, what's easy to do is to take the foods that you've eaten, enter the quantities of the food that you've consumed, like the number of grams, and if you know the nutritional composition data, and you know the nutritional requirements, you can see easily your nutrition and the total amount of calories you've eaten. That's just addition and multiplication, essentially. That's easy to do. There are loads of apps that can do that out there. Probably many of you in the audience have actually used some of these apps. What's really, really hard to do in nutrition is to take the foods that you're planning to eat, and if you know the nutritional composition data, and if you know the nutritional requirements of the individual, is to calculate exact quantities in grams for you to achieve a perfectly balanced diet and get your exact calorie requirements. But why is this so hard? I'm going to give you an example. Imagine your diet consists of only one food. And let's say you eat up to 100 grams of that food. Well, basically here, there's going to be 100 combinations because you could eat 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams, and so on and so forth. If you add a second food and you eat up to 100 grams of that, there's now 10,000 combinations because you can eat up to 100 grams of the first, up to 100 grams of the second. So you can see the number of combinations is increasing. For every food that you add to your diet, this puzzle increases in complexity rapidly, to the point where at just 5 foods at 100 grams each, you've already got 10 billion combinations. So if you plot this as a graph, it might look something like this. As the number of foods in your diet increases, the number of combinations increases with exponential complexity. We need to find the optimal combination. So, what does that mean? Well, it means determining the best balance of a set of foods to achieve nutritional balance across 28 major nutrients. And we need to not exceed or be less than a specific calorie target. However, there may be more than one correct answer. Various valid combinations of foods, because you can have, it doesn't mean that there's only one correct answer. You can still modify the foods and get your perfect balance. Also, each combination can be verified. That's like a small little thing from the website that you'll see later. And also, you should take into consideration sensible portion sizes. It's no good recommending you to eat 1 kilogram of cinnamon and 3 grams of tomato. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, let's take a more realistic example. This is my healthy diet. Well, maybe not so healthy. And for these 10 foods, if we were to have conservative quantities, that means each potential maximum quantity of each food is what we would probably consider as something normal. Just for these 10 foods, there would be up to 2 billion combinations. So, if we were to check, let's say, 1 million combinations a second, it would effectively take us, to go through all of those combinations, 66 million years. Well, so if we had 1 million computers checking 1 million combinations a second, it would basically take a lifetime to calculate. Remember? Exponential complexity. This is a polynomial time problem. What's a polynomial time problem, I hear you ask? Well, a polynomial time problem is basically a name in mathematics that we give to a series of problems whereby the time taken to calculate an answer increases with exponential complexity for every data point that you add. And there's a lot of programmers in here nodding because they know about the traveling salesman problem. Yeah, but I'm going to give you a different example. Let's imagine you run a gardening company, My Garden Company Limited. And here's my smiley workforce, and here's my client base. And in the middle, we have some tools that are used by the gardeners, but they're in limited quantity. Now let's imagine you're the manager, and you need to find the most efficient scenario which ensures that your employees service your clients on the correct days, at the right frequency for a given number of hours per client, and that each worker has the correct tools for the job, which cannot be in more than one place at once, you must remember that, and that the distance travelling between the workers to the clients is not too far. Oops. Wrong button. Okay, now let's also assume that only certain employees are authorised to use certain tools. And let's imagine that only certain clients want certain employees to be there and that certain employees work better with others. This quickly becomes a complex puzzle. Now, as a human, if you have, let's say, 5 or 10 smiley employees, and you have, let's say, 20 or 30 customers, you have, I don't know, 15, 20 pieces of equipment, you can probably make a good guess of that. But now let's imagine that your gardening company gets quite big. Let's say you've got 100 employees. Let's say you've got more than 500 clients, that you've got a couple of hundred different pieces of equipment. You can't calculate an optimal scenario as an individual. It's not possible. There are too many combinations. This is why I think developers can start to solve these kind of problems. Let's review. I believe that polynomial time problems are becoming more and more important in today's connected world because we have big data. We need to analyze this big data and get some insight into it. It's up to us to combine mathematics and programming to solve such complex problems. So it wouldn't be CPU if I didn't talk a little bit about the architecture. In 2014, it was time for me to choose the IT. I needed to solve this problem as a programmer, so I started with the basic project requirements. Okay, so I needed a database to store the data. So I chose MySQL. I needed an object-oriented language for these complex calculations, and so I chose PHP. I also wanted a graphical user interface to interact with the software, so I chose web. The reasons for these are as follows. MySQL, many of you have probably used it. It's free, it's fast, it's easy to set up, and it integrates nicely with PHP. PHP, again, it's free, it's fast. It's a scripting language, which means you don't have to keep compiling it every time you make a change, which in some ways may reduce development time. We know it also has its limitations. And web, well, it's fully cross-platform, mobiles, tablets, devices, different operating systems, you name it. Good choice. But then I was at a stage where I needed to ask myself an important question. Do I need a framework to build this? In my career, this is one of the most frequent questions that I get asked. Tony, which framework should I use to build my application? And we know that there are a lot of different ones to choose from. There's front-end, there's back-end frameworks. The colors are completely incidental. And there's a lot of choice here, but what are the main considerations? For me, a framework is like a foundation. It provides you something that you can instantly work from. You can build up from this. It increases your productivity in some ways. But frameworks, they can also box you into a cage. They can also prevent you from achieving your goal because they force you to do things in a specific way. Let's imagine there's you, and you've got the customer over there somewhere, and you've got these different frameworks that you can choose from. And some of them come pretty close to achieving the goal, but maybe not exactly what the customer wants. You need something else in the middle there. What you need is basically innovation. And there is a solution to this. It's a solution that I believe, which is to create reusable code. So, developers, go out and build a library. What a library is, I'll just explain for maybe the people who don't know what that is basically a set of generic code which can be reused between projects. And it works because you can basically expand this code for your own project. In programming, we might call these abstract classes or interfaces. And also, I think it also helps to improve your efficiency in the long term. When you build a library, you can own the intellectual property here. So if we build libraries at Cyber owns the intellectual property. You can also improve your depth of knowledge. You can look deeper down into the language to understand the features of what's possible. This gives you a better insight into how other frameworks work. However, word of warning, it can be time-consuming. I spent many, many years developing frameworks, or libraries, I should say. And this is what I did in this case. I created a generic PHP library. There were no restrictions. It wasn't a cage. It was just a set of tools. Frameworks, to sum up, they increase your productivity, but they may also cage you. But I think it's important to develop a more in-depth understanding, fundamentals of programming, by building a library. This way you can really familiarize yourself with the features of the language, give you a better insight into how frameworks work. I want to give you a quote to sum it up. When you write a book, you combine words and language to create a masterpiece. Imagine how dull it would turn out if you could only combine existing sentences. So, in 2014, I managed to come up with the first version of this algorithm to calculate the number of grams that I should eat. But it was riddled with errors, it was slow, it took 30, 45 seconds to calculate, and it produced often unexpected results. So I worked tirelessly through the next year, and I came up with a second version. And I knew that I was kind of heading towards something interesting, so actually I took a bold step, and I quit my job in the summer of 2015 to work on this full time. I knew I was onto something because I had developed a way of solving this polynomial time problem in code. And now I'm going to demonstrate to you how I did that. Firstly, let's just review exactly what it is that we're trying to solve. Let's look at our knowns and unknowns. We know the nutritional requirements of the body. We know the calorie requirements. We also know the nutritional composition of the foods to be eaten. This is established data. But we don't know the number of grams of each food to eat. So this is how I solve the problem in PHP. I'm not actually going to show you the code here because it would probably be a little bit long to fit on the screen. But I'm going to simplify it into stages. Effectively, what the algorithm does is it loads the data, of course. We need to load the nutritional requirements, we need to load the foods to be eaten, then also the nutrients in the foods, we need to load the calorie requirements so we can establish our target. Then the algorithm performs an initial estimation. It looks at the individual, not physically, but it looks at the individual's nutritional requirements, it looks at the foods and it says, I think this, just as a guess basically. It's a kind of intelligent guess, it's trying to get you in the right way. Then it starts altering the foods. This enters a cycle. It makes a modification to the foods, the number of grams of each food, and then it checks, is this an okay, perfect nutritional balance now? Usually, in the beginning, it's not. So it loops around and it alters the foods again. This cycle repeats a few times, and when it's complete, we go to another step. We check if there are any unused foods. And by unused foods, I simply mean that the algorithm has determined that 0 grams is the right amount of that food that you should eat, i.e. you shouldn't eat that food. At this point, we remove those unused foods from the cycle, we reset all the grams to 0, and we start again. So this goes round and round. It's basically 2 loops. There is, one other thing is that eventually when there are no unused foods, it's complete. So there are two loops here. There's the calculation loops. There's also this outer repeater. So it's re-entering the cycle. So it's doing some complex calculations, and then it's refining itself. I must stress, this is an iterative process. There is no single mathematical formula to solve it. You can't create a single mathematical formula, plug in the variables, and solve for x. It's not how polynomial time problems work. The nutrition is checked on every iteration. So, this is a resource-intensive process. There are many CPU cycles. Get it? Come on, I worked hard on that. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, in 2016, finally the name Nutriculate was born. As you probably guessed, it's a combination of the words nutrition and calculate. I thought it was nice. So I worked hard in quick succession to develop 3 major versions of the product. So the first version was essentially a single user thing where I could log in, I could use the algorithm, I could save my foods. Version 2 was when I finally upgraded it to PHP 7. That was a long time coming. And I made this into a multi-user site. And then version 3 was when I kind of like scrapped everything and started again. I even did a lot of refining work on the algorithm as well. I realized that I was coming closer to something akin to type 1 artificial intelligence. Why? Well, Nutriculate. This can do the job of any nutritionist better and in a fraction of the time. We can also provide dynamic suggestions to the user. This more or less fits the scope of narrow type 1 AI because it does a job very, very well like a human, but it still can't think. It can't make, it can't make you believe it's human. Anyway, Nutriculate actually is a world first. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I've never seen anything else in the nutrition sphere that can actually calculate the exact number of grams for you to eat to get a perfectly balanced diet. I think of innovation as a series of knowledge sectors which overlap. In this case, I'd researched nutrition, I had some experience in programming, and also was very fond of mathematics. And in the middle, what you get is innovation. I call this the Goldilocks zone of innovation. Now, it's not the Antony Allen show. You can all do this. Or, if you don't possess like 3 knowledge sectors, but let's say 1 or 2, you can also team up with other people, combine your knowledge. But if you're all in the programming sphere, then you'll always be looking at things from a programmer. That's why you need to team up with each other. So, back to the timeline. I formed a limited company in 2017, not important. And then in 2018, I began presenting this to health professionals. So I took this to PhD students in nutrition at the University of Oxford. I took this to doctors. I went to the Center for Endocrinology and Metabolism. I presented this to dietitians, to nutritionists, to people working in hospitals, to pharmaceutical companies. And most of the feedback that I got was not negative, but something afraid of it maybe. I realized that I'd created a kind of disruptive technology because essentially you could put nutritionists out of business. So, Nutriculate can really do the job better, faster, and it's more personalized. It's instant access, basically. And it's also free. So I just want to complete the timeline quickly. So I managed to get a trademark for the name in 2018, but then I put this project on hold when I came to work here at Cyber. So firstly, I just want to say a big thank you, and I'm going to kind of try and do a live demo now. We're going to see how it works. So I'm just going to open my web browser. And we're bang on 30 minutes, that's good. Just going to log in with my username. Skip this screen, it's not relevant for right now. Okay, so this is how it works. First, to demonstrate how the algorithm works. You add the foods that you want to eat. Remember the slide from earlier. I'm going to say banana. And you see already it's starting to try to calculate. Can everybody see this clearly? Yeah? Good. So it's starting to calculate the number of grams. But as I said, if there's only one food in your diet, a banana, it's going to give you quite a lot of bananas. But anyway, let's say probably needs something more than bananas. I'm going to hide this for a second. You can add more foods. You can type in something. Oh, I love me cheddar, so let's add some cheddar. I like coffee. These are all my most frequently eaten foods, by the way, so you have some insight into my personal life. Honey, yes, give me some honey. What it's doing now is it's trying to calculate. It's trying to find a perfect balance, but it's not able to do that at the moment, simply because there are not enough foods in the diet. So I can add more foods, and I could go on, basically adding whatever I want. And you can see how this nutrient map, I call it, is kind of starting to go green. You're starting to see a little bit more information. And if I click on vitamin C, for example, I'll be able to see where I'm getting that vitamin C from. So mostly from kiwi and a bit from banana. I can also click on other vitamins, like potassium here. I can see how much I have. I can see where I'm getting that from, but then I can also have some suggestions to improve it. This still needs a little bit of work, as you see. So this is where the kind of level of intelligence in the software comes in. It starts making suggestions for you to eat. So it's suggesting that I'm low on choline, and we can confirm that by looking at the map. Choline is quite dark and scary here. So it's suggesting that I eat some, eggs mostly. Eggs are very high in choline. So it knows that I eat a lot of boiled eggs. So it uses a ranking algorithm which combines the foods that you frequently eat, your favorites, and also which ones are high relative to other nutrients in that food. So I'm going to add boiled egg. Okay. Choline is looking a bit healthier now, but it's also now saying vitamin B1. I'll just add some sunflower seeds. I like those. And I'll go through this process of adding a few foods. Yeah, blueberries. We all love blueberries. I can continue to add foods that I like myself, so I can add basically whatever I want. Okay, we're getting close now, and if I add carrots, what's happening is, it may be confusing at first, but what essentially is happening is it's trying to alter the number of grams of each food to get closer to your goal. So if I add something more, probably get to a perfectly balanced diet. Ah, interesting. This is always why you do a live demo, because something funny always happens. So in this case, it's slightly overshot the number of calories, but it's getting very close to a perfectly balanced diet, and it's telling me to avoid these two things. So I can add a few more things. Maybe it's suggesting I need more potassium, so let's add tomatoes. Boom. There we go. What's happened? The software now has calculated that if I eat these exact number of grams of these foods, I will get exactly the number of calories that I want. I reduced it slightly from 2,500 to 2,400, and I get a perfectly balanced diet. That's a world first, and this happens in less than a second typically. And I can still add more foods. I can still add, it doesn't bother suggesting anymore because now you've got a perfectly balanced diet. But I can still add more foods that I want to eat. Let's say, what did I have this morning? Maybe some croissant. There we go, some butter croissants. I can't say French very well, I'm sorry. And again, it's putting that food into this list, and it's saying, okay, 59 grams, which is probably probably average or small size croissant. But it's altering everything else, and it's still getting a perfectly balanced diet. I can put in there chocolate, it doesn't matter. It will still attempt to find a perfectly balanced diet. 2,400 calories, perfect balance, 33 grams. Where's the croissant? Now the croissant's gone down to 36 grams. So this is how the algorithm works. But that's not really useful in itself. You need something more. So this is why I developed this kind of food diary system. So I can go in there and I can add foods that I've already eaten. That's breakfast. Let's say I had my default portion, 150 milliliters. Let's say, I had this croissant today. And let's say for breakfast, and it even remembers your average portion, the community average portion, the largest portion, and we can also have some other default portion sizes which are not entered currently. Basically, you can even enter custom number of grams. So if you are really obsessive like me, you can go in and weigh things and then put in the number of grams. So let's say I had 83 grams of banana. And what will happen now is Nutriculate will take into account the foods you've already eaten, and it will calculate the rest of the foods that you should eat and their quantities in order to try to get you a perfectly balanced diet, which means this system is dynamic. Again, it's making suggestions for me. Add some milk, fine. And there we go, it's gone back to a perfectly balanced diet. It also shows me here what my nutrition is today, so you can keep a running total. I can go in and I can click on fat, and I can see where I'm getting that from. Uh-oh, that croissant probably wasn't particularly healthy. Anyway, now Nutriculate has even determined, it's like a nutritionist, a dietitian, it suggests to you, probably, Tony, cut back on the cheddar. Yeah, that's probably what I should do. Now, if I want, I can just remove that. There we go, still perfectly balanced diet. So, I'm gonna end the live demonstration. There's a lot of other features that we have, for example, recipes, so you can create recipes and add foods to them, and then it will calculate the nutritional value in that, and then you can also put that into either to the algorithm and calculate how much you should eat, or just track that. So this is a full, complete solution for nutrition. And I just want to say, do as I say, not as I do, because then you might turn out like me with some extra kilos. Anyway, so I'm just going to take a few questions now. If anybody has some questions, I'll be happy to answer. Kenneth, start with.
At the start, you said 80% of diseases is related to nutrition. Is that 80% of disease types or 80% of disease cases?
That's a very important differential to make. And I believe that this is something more along the lines of disease cases. Because I think to say disease types, that's kind of a very arbitrary distinction.
Yeah, so for example, cancer and diabetes, or cancer has different types in it, but you know what I mean.
Exactly, I do know what you mean, and that is a very important question. So when you start looking into this, I didn't provide all my sources up here, but basically there are a number of doctors out there, and even I think even World Health Organization has the same statistic on their website. This is a known thing, but let's be frank, commercial interest is not in you being healthy. Commercial interest is not in you eating a perfectly balanced diet and never needing to go to a doctor and never needing to take pharmaceuticals. They prefer you to stay ill, to not increase your longevity, because they want you to live to 68 so that you pay your taxes and then you die a year later. Sorry, that's the way it works. Oh no, not I, because I shall live to 150. Well, I shall try. Anyway, Roman, please.
So, Tony, please tell us, why aren't you charging for this and making lots and lots of money? I still struggle to see, you got a completely unique idea here.
Thank you.
You sell yourself as kind of short, I think, but if this is as unique and world first as you claim to be, then why isn't there more interest from the actual end users?
That's a wonderful and very knife-in-the-back question, Roman. Thank you. Well, in short, I'll answer that. I'm a useless marketeer. I don't possess those skills. I've got knowledge in nutrition and programming and mathematics development, but I'm a useless marketeer. And when I go out there and I speak to these individuals who I think voices should really matter, like the doctors or the nutritionists or the dietitians or the PhD students working in these fields, I expect them to say, wow, that's really cool. But the fact is that they don't want to really hear that. And you're right, I should go more to users. So if somebody wants to team up and start marketing this, then I'd be happy to. Only if Roy permits it, of course. Anyway, next question. Sorry, you had your hand up.
Suppose you would increase the time spent to 1 week or something, and work with complete meals instead.
Mm-hmm.
More complete meals. How far off would you end up compared to like a perfect score like you have now?
Okay, that's a good question. At the moment, the scoring system, you've also got the Nutriculate score in the top right-hand corner, which is like a running total for the day, which is, that's a patented calculation. Anyway, that gives basically up to 100. At the moment, everything is on a daily basis. But that's an excellent question, because I have some plans to develop this further in order to take into account nutrients that last much longer in the body. For example, iron. You don't need to eat loads of iron every day, but the running total should be around 8.1 milligrams for men and 18 milligrams for women. But vitamin C, for example, has a half-life of 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes, it's decreasing by half. That's why you always see me gorging on oranges at work when there's a fruit basket. So does that answer your question? Or?
But also, I think if you want somebody to use it, or if you want to put the dietitian out of work, what they usually do, they tell you what you should eat in basic terms, which translates into meals or recipes.
Mm.
So if you get individual nutrients or individual ingredients, you're not really solving the same problem as a diet or whatever.
Maybe not right now, but we could easily develop this to be basically a set of daily plans. Because you can add the foods that you want to eat and it calculates perfect grams for you, we could develop this so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. Sky's the limit. This is not a finished product. Sorry, Raymond had his hand up.
Yeah, it's not about the implementation, it's more about the usage of it. What is the advantage of having a diet like this where you use like proper food and you calculate the exact amount to get the vitamins rather than
Whoops.
rather than let's say like many people do, they buy these vitamin pills and like this I don't know if it was like cost to skip.
There we go. That's a good question. Look, at the end of the day, vitamin pills are another basically type of pharmaceutical. It's like saying, you're not good enough at solving your diet problems, so here's some pills. And those pills they're quite expensive, really. So if you want to get your entire nutrition from a box of pills, you're not really going to be doing your body any good, because the thing about foods is we've evolved alongside many of the foods that we eat. So our bodies have naturally, over hundreds of thousands or millions of years, have developed to utilize those nutrients from those foods. So you could go out and buy nutrients, yeah, but some synthetic nutrients are also different.
And that was just a comment on like how this thing could be improved like in the future. Is that because I agree with you that like pills is just it's not the optimal solution, but
Yeah.
it's an easy solution to just go and buy some pills.
So if anything is worth doing in life, it probably requires some effort.
What should be done to improve this in the future is to make it more easy than just go and buy pills.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd be very happy to collaborate. Sorry, there was a question over there. You? Yeah.
One comment from the front, and also I really love to join the team if I can.
Sure.
It's like when you say like the user interest, one thing as a designer, what I think about is like you talk about the functional needs. Probably we need to think about emotional needs of users as well. Of course, we have measurements and functionality features. You're constantly asking the user to compete with your ideal self all the time. When you think about your emotions, if you're put out into that every single day. So probably that's something we can go into.
I would love to collaborate with you. Yeah, maybe I understand that it has a lot of emotional impact, because the first thing that I realized when I started this and when I created this is, oh my God, everything that I've been doing for 25 odd years of my life has basically been wrong. My understanding of nutrition is incorrect. That was the whole purpose of doing this, is to dive deeper and discover the truth. And of course, there is that emotional block. If you see this, you enter your pizza and chips and cookies and chocolate, and you get told that your diet is hopeless, It's going to be an emotional shock, yeah, but I'd love to collaborate with you. Perhaps we can come up with some better ideas. Sorry, Roy, you had a question.
It's really cool what you're presenting.
Thank you.
What I'm thinking about is, what about taste?
Taste of foods.
The taste of the meal, the combination of foods. Here you're calculating how much of each. Most meals are a combination of different tastes and different products.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be cool if you could team up with a Michelin star chef to create some algorithm to generate the Michelin star meals?
Well, if we could get to that level of artificial intelligence, then I think we can make a few billions there, Roy. So let's do team up. I'm very happy for that. Okay, so that's a great question. This is not designed necessarily at the moment to tell you what will taste great together. Maybe that's something that we could work along. We could do nutritional analysis and then taste analysis and stuff. Hang on.
Just a quick note, we are running soon out of time. So,
Okay, I'll just wrap it up by quickly finishing this question. We do have a feature in this program now which enables you to build recipes. So if you do build your own recipes, you love to cook, you simply put in all the ingredients, like here, whatever. This is some vegetarian curry I made ages ago. It gives you a nutritional analysis. I can see, ooh, it's quite fatty, but anyway, it doesn't matter. And I can upload a picture, and then it gives me the nutrition per 100 grams. And then if I want to consume that food, I just go to here and I say I want to eat vegetarian curry prepared 15th of September, and it will calculate that into my nutritional into my base, let's say. So it's saying 92 grams, okay, probably not very much. But you can imagine that if you were to create bake your own bread or create your own spaghetti bolognese that you're going to eat over 3 days, you can put in all the ingredients if you want to be obsessive like me, and then it will tell you actually how much to eat. So you can still use your own custom-made foods. I really think we have to end the questions there, I'm sorry, but thank you so much.